A new report from a British university has discovered a shocking problem with the English countryside. Its problem? Well, it's full of English people. Now, that's not a joke. It's the conclusion of a major academic report. The problem is it's not just one absurd report, but it's a key part of this well-funded hypocritical machine that's designed to just attack British identity. The Rural Racism Project, published by the University of Leicester's Centre for Hate Studies, begins with a conclusion masquerading as a question. Its stated goal isn't to find out if the countryside is racist, but to challenge dominant depictions of rural England as peaceful. So they start with a fairly simple and undeniable fact. According to the Office for National Statistics, the population of rural England is, I think, 96.8% white, and in the most remote areas that figure rises to, I think, over 98%. So for most of us, we would just view that as a simple demographic statistic. It's like observing that a forest is mostly green. But for these academics, this fact isn't a neutral observation. It's the foundational crime scene. They call this the problem of whiteness. Their report concludes that rural identity is habitually equated with whiteness, and this, they claim, creates exclusionary narratives. So what they're doing is essentially pathologizing the natural historic connection between the native people of England and their ancestral homeland. It's like taking the simple fact that the English exist in their own country and diagnosing that as a disease. It's not an investigation, it's an ideological hit job. Now, the defenders of the report will say that this is just about giving a voice to the lived experiences of minorities who feel like outsiders in the countryside. But that's just deliberate misdirection. The project's own documents show they didn't set out to neutrally investigate those experiences. They set out to prove a pre-existing political belief that a peaceful, traditional, and majority-white England is an illusion that must be challenged. It's basically just activism dressed up as research. So it's not science, it's a witch trial where the verdict is decided before any evidence was heard. But if the basic premise is dishonest, what's the purpose? Like, what's the real agenda behind this kind of work being done? Well, the glaring hypocrisy of their logic gives the game away. I mean, the entire argument of the report, the actual foundation of their moral outrage, completely collapses the second that you apply its logic consistently. I mean, the report condemns rural England for being 97% white. They call this a lack of diversity and a sign of exclusion. Okay, let's take their logic and apply it fairly. Let's look at the official 2021 census data for urban areas. I think the London borough of Newham is about 85% non-white. Brent is about 85% as well, non-white. And if you go down to a more local level, the neighbourhood of South or West, I think is about 98% non-white. So it's statistically less diverse than the rural areas this report condemns. So where is the multi-million-pound Leverhulme Trust grant for the Centre for Hate Studies to investigate why white people might feel like outsiders in Southall? Where's the report demanding Newham challenge its lack of diversity? Well, it doesn't exist, and it never will. The journalist Gavin Rice, I think, summed it up perfectly. He said, can you imagine if a bunch of academics published a report saying parts of the UK are too black or too Asian or too Chinese? This report literally says the existence of areas where most people are white is racist. Now, the counter-argument that you'll get is always the same, but all areas of Britain should reflect the country's modern diversity. The problem, of course, is they don't apply this principle universally. The fact is, it's only ever applied in one direction, as a weapon against majority British communities. And that proves it's not a principle at all. It's a tool of demographic and cultural engineering aimed at one group and one group only. This isn't about diversity, it's about demolition. So if the goal isn't principled diversity, what is it they're actually demanding? Well, it seems more like cultural surrender. I mean, the Report's recommendations aren't a gentle request for a welcome mat. The report explicitly calls for simple changes, such as the availability of halal food or spaces for prayer in rural businesses. It demands thoughtful adaptation and a willingness to change from the host community. It tells heritage bodies they need to rewrite history by installing plaques and exhibits to credit enslaved and colonized labour. But this completely inverts the principle of integration. For centuries, the common sense deal was that newcomers adapt to the host culture. This report insists the hosts must dismantle its culture for the newcomer. It puts the entire burden of change onto the existing rural population, whose traditions are framed as inherently hostile. This is a radical departure, even from the UK government's official policy, which states that if people want to come here, they must learn our language and integrate. And this shows the true goal. It's not about inclusion, it's about replacement. The aim is to deconstruct the very idea of a core English identity, to make the native population feel like strangers in their own land, constantly apologising for a heritage that is relentlessly reframed as shameful. And the people making these demands are not neutral observers, they're career activists. I'm sure the university would say that these are just small changes to make people feel more welcome. This is a respected, peer-reviewed piece of research. But let's look at who wrote it. A key author is Professor Corinne Fowler, the University of Leicester's Professor of Colonialism and Heritage. Does that sound like a neutral job title? This is the same academic who directed the controversial project that audited 93 National Trust properties for links to colonialism. She's publicly stated that historic country houses are a veneer, an idyllic facade, and we've fallen for it. She believes white Britons need to reflect a little bit on their easy sense of possession and belonging in the countryside. This isn't an objective academic, it's a political activist with a lifelong project to deconstruct English heritage, and this report is simply her latest weapon. This has got nothing to do with research at all, it's just a vendetta. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't just stay in academia. These things have a track record of becoming laws and making it into day-to-day life. So it's a fatal mistake to dismiss this as just a silly little report that can be ignored. It's a key component of a well-oiled machine that turns academic grievance studies into real-world power. There's a clear playbook. First comes the academic report, claiming to find some new form of systemic bigotry. Then comes the media campaign, and then inevitably comes the policy change. You think it's an exaggeration? I mean, she's done this before, with her National Trust report that directly led to exhibitions being changed, new advisory groups being set up, and even new curriculum materials being incorporated into schools. This is the assembly line for cultural change, and this machine has two particularly cynical components. The first is an intellectual trap to silence any and all criticism. As part of this project, the researchers ran a second study on the backlash to their first study. They analysed 193,000 words of online comments and concluded that anyone who disagreed with them was guilty of denial and deflection. I mean, it's a joke. It's a perfect self-sealing loop. Step 1, call millions of people racist. Step 2, when they object, publish another report calling their objections racist. And then step 3, collect your next grant. I mean, the final line of defence from this machine is always, but it's vital work funded by respected charities for public good. Well, let's take a look at the funding. This project was paid for by the Leverhulme Trust. So where did the Leverhulme Trust get its money? Its endowment comes from William Lever, the founder of Lever Brothers, whose business empire relied on the cheap production of palm oil from large concessionary areas in the Congo under the brutal regime of King Leopold II of Belgium. And one of the report's own recommendations is that institutions must trace and disclose their connections to colonial and racial violence. They wrote a report demanding everyone else confess their colonial sins, while cashing a cheque from a fund built on the profits of one of the most notorious colonial enterprises in history. The hypocrisy is just staggering. It's not a moral crusade, it's a morally bankrupt grift. A machine that manufactures division, funded by hypocrisy and designed to silence dissent. This report is a textbook case of psychological projection. It's the work of a small, hostile academic elite projecting its own resentment and divisive ideology onto the tolerant, decent majority of this country. The Centre for Hate Studies does not study hate, it manufactures it. They go looking for division with a magnifying glass, and when they can't find it, they invent it by twisting statistics and pathologising normality. The report isn't a diagnosis of a problem in rural England. The report is the problem. It's the true source of the hate it pretends to discover. And this is nothing other than a direct assault on the right of the English people to have a homeland, to have a culture, and to feel at ease in the country their ancestors built. To see your own identity, your own towns and villages, described as a problem to be solved by activists cashing cheques from the proceeds of colonialism is just outrageous. But understanding their nasty little playbook is, I think, the first step in defending ourselves against it.